Hello and welcome to the 29th video in this beginner's guide to Adobe After Effects. In this tutorial, I'm going to showcase 10 handy tips you will need to know as a beginner in After Effects. So now we are at the end of the essential practice section. Over the past few episodes, we have practiced some of the basic tools and familiarized ourselves with some of the features in After Effects. Now we are ready to embark on a full project exercise. But before that, I want to recap and cover some essential tips which will help you before we get into the nitty-gritty of creating a project from scratch in After Effects. Now the tips I'm going to cover in the next few minutes are things that are going to improve your workflow and help you use the program effectively and also bring you up to speed with how the program works and what to look out for in future. So it will help you a lot to remember what we are about to cover. So in this video, we are going to be covering tips in the following areas. 1. Workflow tips. 2. Zoom and maneuvering tips. 3. Interface tips. 4. Visual aid tips. 5. Creative tips. 6. Timeline panel tips. 7. Layer tips. 8. Editing tips. 9. Keyframe tips. And 10. Exporting tips. Now, the topics covered in this video are listed in the description along with their times. So if at any point you wish to skip ahead or back, be sure to check them out in the description. Now, I am also about to cover a huge amount of shortcuts. Now, these are going to help improve your workflow and your efficiency. Now, if you want to take a closer look and refer to the shortcuts I'll be covering in more depth, you can check out the shortcut page on the course PDF that comes free with this course. Download link is in the description. After this video, you will get a huge insight into some of the tips that are going to help you use the program more productively. So let's get into it. So here I am in After Effects and I have a document open here which I'm going to use to demonstrate all the essential tips you will need to know as a beginner. To follow along with this video, you will need to open this document I have prepared especially for this tutorial. With the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 29, 10 Handy Tips, and open the 10 Handy Tips After Effects file. And you'll have the same document I have open here. Now, if you don't have the project folder and you want to follow along with this tutorial using this document I have prepared especially for you, you can download this project folder for a small fee. The download link with instructions is in the description. The download folder comes with lots of exercise documents we will be using on this course that have been carefully developed to aid your learning experience. The folder also comes with document resources such as videos, graphics, and images you can use to build your first video presentation from scratch later on in this course. To get the full learning experience, I recommend you get the project folder. Download link with instructions is in the description. So with the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 29, 10 Handy Tips, and open the 10 Handy Tips After Effects file. And you will have the same document I have open here. So I want to draw your attention over to the project panel. Here we can see a folder called After Effects Tips. And in this folder we can see a number of compositions. Now along this video, I'm going to use these to demonstrate particular tips. So double click on the first composition here, under the C, and let's start with the first tip set. 1. Workflow tips. So the first workflow tip is shortcut for the selection tool. The shortcut key to activate the selection tool is V. With the selection tool active, you can click on elements in your composition panel to select them and move them around like so. Next tip, free transform. So with the selection tool active, you can click and select an object in the composition panel. With it selected, you should see a bounding box around it. Now this allows you to transform the object quickly. For example, if you carefully click and drag on one of the squares on the bounding box, you can easily change the scale and reverse the image like so. By holding Shift on the keyboard, you can change the scale to the original ratio like so. Next tip, undo. So whatever you do in After Effects, for example, move objects, scale the object, apply any effects or move layers around, if you wish to undo, simply press Command Z on Mac or Control Z on PC. Each time you press it, it will take you back a step. Next tip, the type tool. If at any point you want to add type to your comp, simply press Command-T on Mac or Control-T on PC. This will activate the Type tool, which you can click and add type easily. To edit size, typeface and color, simply change it in the character panel over on the right. Next tip, the Shape tool. Now at any point, if you want to add a shape to your comp, simply press Q on the keyboard. This will activate the Shape Builder tool. Now if you keep pressing Q on the keyboard, notice up in the Tools menu, the shape will toggle through the 5 possible shapes you can choose. Simply keep pressing Q until you see the shape you want, then click and draw like so. By holding Shift, you can set the correct scale for the shape. Next tip, managing the anchor point. Now, every time you click on an object, you will notice a crosshair. This is the anchor point, and it's important, as this is the point that effects take their bearing from, such as scaling, rotation, and animation across a path. If we want to change the position of the anchor point on an object, with the object selected, select the Anchor Point tool up in the top menu, and this will allow us to click and move the point around. Now, if I press V to activate the Selection tool and activate Free Transform, you can see how it scales based on the anchor point. If I press R to rotate and tweak the rotation of the object, you can see how it rotates around the anchor point. Now, if we want to put the anchor point back into the center of the object, simply come up to Layer, down to Transform, and click Center Anchor Point in the layer content. You will now see the anchor point be placed right in the center of the object. Now, if we scale and rotate again, we will see it will be based on our new anchor point position. So the last tip, use folders to organize your media files. So as you develop your project in After Effects, you will soon build up a lot of media components over in your project panel. If you are building a big presentation, you will soon find yourself with lots of images, videos, and compositions. One of the best ways to manage all this in the project panel is with folders. Looking at this document here, I have carefully organized all my components into their respective folders. Here I have an Assets folder containing all my images, videos, and presets. In each folder, I have additional folders organizing them further. Using folders keeps everything in order and makes it easy to find your content and refer to your links later on. And to add folders is really easy. Simply click on the folder icon at the bottom of the project panel, and this will create a new folder, which you can rename and start dropping media into. Now you can create as many folders as you like, and drag and drop them into each other easily. So the next tip set is zoom and maneuvering. So back in the project panel, double click on the second comp, London Eye. So the first zoom tip is free zooming. If you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, by scrolling in and out, you will easily be able to zoom in and out of your composition panel like so. Now, if you don't have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can use the keyboard shortcuts. Pressing the comma and full stop buttons will zoom in and out in increments like so. Next tip, easy pan. When you are zoomed in close on a composition, an easy way to pan across your canvas area is to press and hold spacebar and click and drag. When you press spacebar, the mouse icon will change to a hand icon. With spacebar held down, you can easily click and drag to maneuver around your canvas area like so. Next tip, zoom to 100%. At any point while you are zooming, if you wish to zoom in or out to approximately 100%, simply press the shortcut key, which is the / button on the keyboard. Next tip, fit canvas area to your composition panel. At any point while you are zooming, if you wish to fit the canvas area to the composition panel, simply press the shortcut key Alt / on the keyboard. This will snap the canvas area to fit in the visible composition panel area. So the next tip is interface tips. So back in the project panel, double click on the fifth comp, Video Edit. So the first interface tip is working with custom workspaces. In After Effects, there are a variety of workspaces you can choose from which can help you with your workflow. If you come up to Windows, you will see an option called Workspace. If you come into this, you will see a variety of workspaces you can choose from, such as Animation, Effect, Motion Tracking, and Text, to name a few. If you click on any of these options, you will notice the workspace change to focus more on a particular workflow. Up until this point on the course, I have been using the All Panels, so I'll just click back on that. So the next tip is Reset Workspaces. Now, if for whatever reason you accidentally move panels around in After Effects, which can happen occasionally and accidentally, For example, I accidentally close the composition panel and click and move a panel from one place to another. Now I cannot see my composition panel and my timeline panel is moved to the side of the screen. So right now it's a bit of a mess and I can't continue with the work. So simply come up to Window, into Workspace and scroll down and click Reset All Panels. And this should reset all the panels back to the way they were previously. Next tip, toggle panels. Now the After Effects interface can seem cramped at the best of times. Often there won't be enough screen space to see everything. Now if you carefully place your mouse cursor over the edge of your panels, you will see the mouse cursor change to arrows pointing up and down or left and right. This is After Effects suggesting you can click and drag. If we click and drag, we can push the panels away or pull out our panels to reveal the contents inside. This may help to see more layers in the timeline panel or see more details in the project panel or see more options in the side panels. Now for those of you using more recent versions of After Effects, another mistake that can happen is sometimes you may double click on a panel by accident. If this happens, it can fill the screen, like so. If this happens, just simply double click the panel again and it should snap back. Next tip, editing columns in panels. Another thing you should keep in mind is that we can control the columns that appear in such panels as the project panel and the timeline panel. For example, over in the project panel, and let's just drag this out, at the top here we can see a range of columns for the panel. If we right click in the little area, we can select which column we want to see. And with our columns visible, we can place our mouse cursor just next to them and expand or collapse the width, like so. And we can even click and drag to reorder them. In this instance, I like to have the color labels before the file names. Now down in the timeline panel, we can also control which columns are visible. As you use After Effects, you will want to access the blending modes, the track matte and the parent link columns. Now these do tend to take up a lot of space here. So if you want to toggle the visibility of these columns, you can right click and select Hide This. If you want to bring them back, you can again right click, come down to Columns and click the specific column to bring them back. Now you can also use the keyboard shortcut F4 to toggle the view of the switches in the timeline panel. Next tip, open the effects controls. Now as you apply effects to your layers on your timeline, you can control the settings in the effects controls panel. A quick way to access the effects controls if you cannot see it is to use the shortcut. So first, select a layer with an effect applied. In this case, I'll select the third layer down. By pressing F3 on the keyboard, you will be able to bring up the effects controls panel on the left to see the effects applied to your layers where you can make further modifications. So the next tip set is visual aids. So back in the project panel, and I can access this by clicking on the project tab at the top of the panel on the left. Next, double click on the fourth comp, Tower Bridge. So the first interface tip is rulers, guides and grids. Now as you work in the composition panel, you will be composing all the visual elements that make up your video sequence. Now there are a number of visual aids you can use. By pressing Command R on Mac or Control R on PC, we can activate rulers. This will allow us to click and drag guides out from the rulers on the far left and the top of the composition panel and into the composition. These can be helpful for aligning to the center of the frame or to specific parts of a composition. To toggle the guides on and off, simply press Command : on Mac or Control : on PC. Remember to press Command R on Mac or Control R on PC to toggle away the rulers. Now, if at any point we want to activate the grid, we can press Command' on Mac or Control' on PC. And if we want to change the properties of the grid, we can come up to After Effects on Mac or Edit on PC, then down to Preferences, come down to Grid and Guides and toggle the values at the top. Now, at the bottom of the composition panel, you will have a Grids and Guide button. If you select this, you will be able to activate the title safe, grid and proportional grid. Next tip, view bounding box and layer controls. Now, as you click on your elements in your video sequence, you should see what is called a bounding box around it. This indicates you have the layer selected and gives you the ability to quickly transform the layer. Now, if for whatever reason you cannot see the bounding box, you can activate it quickly by pressing the keyboard shortcut. By pressing Command-Shift-H on Mac or Control-Shift-H on PC, you can toggle the bounding box on and off. You can also come up to View and make sure Show Layer Controls is checked. Next tip, flip horizontally. So if there is an element in your video sequence you wish to flip horizontally, like a video or a graphic element, and let's click on this cloud here. With the element selected, simply come up to Layer, then down to Transform and click Flip Horizontally. Next tip, RAM Preview. As you compose your video sequences and create animations, you will want to preview your project. This can be done by simply hitting spacebar on the keyboard to start the preview and spacebar to stop the preview. Next tip, render quality. Previewing a video sequence relies heavily on your system RAM. If you have a simple comp like this, then you can easily preview at full resolution. However, if you are previewing a super high resolution video or perhaps a complex effect, then you can simply change the resolution factor on the drop down at the bottom of the composition panel. Here you can toggle between full, half or quarter. Setting the resolution to half or quarter will appear pixelated in your composition panel, but will have a smoother preview. As well as setting the resolution factor in the drop down, you can also use the shortcut keys. For full resolution, you can press Command J on Mac or Control J on PC. For half resolution, you can press Command Shift J on Mac or Control Shift J on PC. For quarter resolution, you can press Command Shift Alt J on Mac or Control Shift Alt J on PC. Next tip, region of interest. So the last tip was about smoothing out a preview. Now another method you can use to improve the smoothness of a preview is to use region of interest. Now if you have a really complex transition or effect, perhaps a particle effect or a 3D effect, then you can use region of interest. This can be located at the bottom of the composition panel next to the resolution factor. If you select this, then you can click and drag on a particular area of your composition. When you preview this, you will only focus on a specific area, which will again put less stress on your processor and RAM resource. To edit the region of interest, simply click and drag the bounding box and click the button to turn it off. Next tip, purge memory. Now, while we're on the topic of smoothness and system efficiency, there is something else you should be aware of. As you use After Effects, you will build up memory and disk cache. This uses up your system resources and over time can slow your performance down. What you can do here every so often is come up to Edit, down to Purge and click Purge All Memory or Purge All Memory and Disk Cache. This can clear your memory and cache and speed things up for you. So the next tip set is creative tips. So the first tip is New Comp. At any point, if you wish to create a new composition in your project, simply press Command N on Mac or Control N on PC. This will bring up the New Comp dialog box, which we can name and change the settings. I'll just name this New Comp and click OK for now. Remember, upon creating your new comp, you will see it appear in the project panel. Next tip, New Solid Layer. So as you work in After Effects, sometimes you may want to set a background color or you want to create a full color layer to work with. We can do this by creating a solid layer and using the shortcut. If we press Command Y on Mac or Control Y on PC, we can bring up the new solid settings. Here we can specify the size of the solid layer and the color. In this instance, I'll leave it set to 1920 by 1080 and select a red color and click OK. Notice we will now have a new red solid layer in the timeline panel. Next tip, add media easily to a comp. So as you begin to bring media into your project, like images and video, you will then want to bring them into your composition. An easy way is to use the keyboard shortcut. For example, if we come to the project panel and toggle down the assets folder to reveal the video folder, I'll toggle down the aquarium folder and here we will see some video. So to easily add a media file to your comp, simply click it and use the keyboard shortcut. If we press Command / on Mac or Control / on PC, we can place the media file straight into the comp. And this can be done with any media. So if we come into the images folder and toggle down the PNG folder, click on the fish orange file and again press Command / on Mac or Control / on PC and the media will be placed straight in. Next tip, fit to comp height. Now, there may be times you want to fit an object to the height of the composition. With an item selected, if we press Command / Alt G on Mac or Control / Alt G on PC, we can quickly fit an object to the height of the comp. Next tip, fit to comp width. Now, there may be times you want to fit an object to the width of the composition. For example, if we come into the Assets folder, into the Images folder and into the JPEG folder, we can click an image and press Command/ on Mac or Control/ on PC to easily place the image into the comp. Now sometimes an image may be a lot bigger than the canvas size, so to fit the image to the comp width, we can press Command/Alt-H on Mac or Control/Alt-H on PC, and that will fit the image to the width of the comp. Next tip, fit to comp. Now there may be times you want to fit an object to the width and height of a composition. For example, I'll click off the picture to deselect it, I'll come up and click on the Shape Builder tool, select a square, draw a small square in the composition, click on the fill, set it to a gradient, then click on the color and set the gradient to a light pink into a green, and then take away any stroke that might be applied. Now, if I want to set this shape to the size of the comp, I can use the keyboard shortcut. If we press Command-Alt-F on Mac or Control-Alt-F on PC, we can easily fit the shape to the comp. And now we have a quick gradient background where we can grab the gradient handles and change like so. Now, if we were to come down to the timeline panel over on the left and hit a quick blending mode and choose Overlay, we can apply a funky color effect to the image there. So the next tip set is Timeline Panel Tips. So back in the project panel, double click on the 6th comp, Fish Swim. So the first tip is Time Indicator Navigation. Now in After Effects, everything revolves around the time indicator, both in the timeline and in the composition panel. This is what we use to pinpoint a certain part of your video sequence and display it in your composition panel, and to set keyframes for effects. We can navigate the time indicator along the timeline easily by either clicking and dragging it along the timeline or simply clicking on the timeline where we want it to go. Next tip, setting your work area. As you begin to develop your video sequences over time, there may be instances where you will want to preview just a small part of your sequence, or even simply export part of your sequence. To quickly set the start of your workspace, you can press B on the keyboard. So first click on the timeline where you want the work area to start and press B. You will notice the beginning of the work area snap to the time indicator. To quickly set the end of the workspace, you can press N on the keyboard. So if we click on the timeline where you want the work area to end and press N, you will notice the end of the work area snap to the time indicator. And now we have this work area set here, represented by this bar on the top. Now, if we place the time indicator inside this area and press spacebar, we can preview just this section of our video sequence, and this will loop. Next tip, timeline markers. Now, as you create your video sequence, you may want to organize your sequence into sections, so you can focus on one part at a time. Or you may simply want to reference one part of your sequence for later. A handy feature you can use here are markers. So to the far right of the timeline panel, we can see this icon. If we click and drag this out, we can place a marker anywhere we want. Upon release, we will have a marker. Now, by default, the marker is numbered 1. Now, if we move our time indicator further along the video sequence, we can press Shift 2. This will add another marker. And if we move along the timeline further and press Shift 3, we can add another marker. Now you can do this up to 9. Now with the markers set, we can simply jump to the various parts of the video sequence by pressing the number on the keyboard at any time. This is good if you have a really long video sequence, so you can navigate easily and quickly. Next tip, snap to the time indicator. In After Effects, everything revolves around the time indicator. Now we need to have precise control of the time indicator to navigate through the timeline and around our media elements. One tip is to snap the time indicator. As we click and drag the time indicator across the timeline, if we press and hold Shift on the keyboard, the timeline will snap to important things. For example, if we move the time indicator across some frames, by holding Shift, the time indicator will snap to the keyframes, allowing us to precisely place the time indicator on top. We can snap to the beginning of layers and snap to the end of layers. This helps us precisely pinpoint the time indicator without having to manually place it, which can be fiddly. Next tip, moving along one frame at a time. Now, if we press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and press left or right on the arrow keys, we can move the time indicator left or right one frame at a time. This is great for those times where we will want to move across the timeline in super small increments. So the next tip set is layer tips. So back in the project panel, double click on the third comp, layer tips. So the first tip is select multiple. So as you begin to add multiple media elements to your video composition, there may be times when you want to select a few layers to move them around in one go. To select multiple layers, simply press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and select the layers. With them all selected, you can click and drag them together. Now, if for whatever reason you decide to deselect a particular layer at any point, simply press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and click back on the layer to deselect it. Next tip. Select layer above or below. Now, if you have a particular layer selected in the timeline panel and you want to select the layer above, you can press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and press up or down on the keyboard. This will allow you to scroll quickly up or down without having to use the mouse cursor to select the layer. Next tip. Move a layer up or down. So as you build your video sequence and start to organize the layer structure, you may want to move your layers either up or down. A really quick way to do this is to use the keyboard shortcut. With the layer selected, simply press Command open square bracket on Mac or Control open square bracket on PC to move a layer down, or press Command close square bracket on Mac or Control close square bracket on PC to move a layer up. Next tip, deselect a layer. Now, as you work with your media elements in the composition panel, there will be times where you want to deselect a layer. Now you can do this by clicking off a layer or into the grey area in the composition panel with the selection tool. However, another really fast way to do this is to use the keyboard shortcut. To deselect a layer fast, simply press F2. Next tip, duplicate layers. So as you build the media elements in your video sequence, there may be times where you will want to quickly duplicate a layer. For example, if I have this fish image here and I want to get a few more in, now I can come into the Assets folder and drag them in. Or I could use a really simple shortcut. With the layer selected in your timeline panel, simply press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to duplicate the layer. Upon click, a new layer will appear directly above, which you can click and move around with the selection tool. I'll hit Command D on Mac or Control D on PC again to duplicate, and just like that, I have a few more fish images. This is a really easy way to quickly duplicate elements in your video sequence. Next tip, replacing layers. Now this is a really useful tip. Sometimes you will have a media element in your timeline, for example these fish images here, and you may want to replace them with other images. So if I come into my images folder in the assets folder and come into the PNG folder, now what if I want to change one to orange or one to green? Well, I could drag it in, but then I would have to resize it and reposition it, and that would take some time. An easier way to do this is to first select the layer you want to replace, in this case the fish. With the layer selected in the timeline panel, I'll come to the project panel, click the layer I want to replace it with, and press and hold Alt on the keyboard, and click and drag it down onto the layer name and release. Upon release, the layer will be replaced with a new asset. So I'll select my other fish image, I'll come into the project panel, click on the layer I want to replace it with, and press and hold Alt on the keyboard, and upon release the layer will be replaced with a new asset. Easy. Now this can be done for any media, for example this video here. We can see here it's nicely cut into the video edit. If I wanted to replace it with a different video, first I will select the layer, then come into the assets folder, into the video folder, and drag a new video down while holding Alt onto the layer name. Upon release, the new video will drop in like so, maintaining the edit. Easy. Next tip, scale, rotation, opacity, and position. So as you bring your media elements into your video sequence, there will be times where you will want to quickly edit the scale, rotation, or opacity of your elements. With the layer selected, if you press S on the keyboard, this will quickly reveal the scale settings on your layer, which you can easily toggle. With the layer selected, if you press T on the keyboard, this will quickly reveal the opacity settings. Now, there will be times where you will want to animate the position of the element. With the layer selected, if you press P on the keyboard, this will quickly reveal the position settings on the layer. Next tip, applying layer colors. So as you bring in your media elements into your video sequence, there will be times where you will want to manage your layers so at a glance you know what kind of layers they are. On the timeline, we have a neat feature where we can color the layers. Over next to the layer names is a colored box. If you click this, you will have a choice of colors. Simply choose one of these to assign a distinct color to your layer. Next tip, snap layers. So as we work with layers, we are able to click and drag them across the timeline. Now if we press and hold Shift while dragging a layer, we can snap the beginning or the end of a layer to the beginning or end of another layer. We can also use the time indicator to help us position a layer in a particular place. If we place the time indicator where we want a layer to begin or end, then we can click and drag a layer while holding Shift and it will snap the beginning or end of the layer very easily. This is a little feature that helps us quickly and accurately move our layers around and position on the timeline. Next tip, quickly navigate to the beginning or end frame. With the layer selected, a quick way to navigate to the end or the beginning is to press I or O. Pressing I will snap the time indicator to the start of the layer. Pressing O will snap the time indicator to the end of the layer. This can help a lot when quickly navigating through your layers in your video sequence. So the last tip is show effects on layer. So to demonstrate this, I need to come back to the project panel and double click on the fifth comp, Video Edit. So as you work on various projects, there may be times where you open up someone else's work or you want to keep track of what you have done on your layers. A really quick tip to reveal all the effects you have applied to your layers is to select the layer you wish to see. In this case, I'll look at each layer, so I'll select them all, then simply press E on the keyboard. Upon click, this will reveal any effects that have been applied. If no effects are applied, then you will see nothing. But if there is an effect applied, you will see the effect appear under the layer name and circle dots over to the right representing the keyframes. So the next tip set is editing tips. So back in the project panel, double click on the seventh comp, Hyde Park, and the first tip is trimming clips. Now when you drop a video onto your timeline, its length will be represented by a bar here in the timeline panel. As we scroll our time indicator over, we can see the video play in the composition panel. Now there may be occasions where you will want to trim your video layer. A really swift way of doing this is to use the keyboard shortcut. So first place the time indicator where you want the video layer to start, and with the layer selected press Alt open square bracket and that will trim the layer's beginning. Next, place the time indicator where you want the video clip to end, and with the layer selected, press Alt close square bracket, and that will trim the layer's end. Now remember, you will still see the remainder of the beginning and end of the layer content, but it will not be visible. Once clipped, this will allow you to move your video clip around in your video sequence. Next tip, split a clip. Another handy tip to know when editing video is how to quickly split a clip. Simply place the time indicator where you would like to split a clip and press Command-Shift-D on Mac or Control-Shift-D on PC. This will split the clip and create two layers which you can then flexibly move around your timeline. So the last tip is create a pre-comp. So once you have edited a video sequence together using multiple video clips, you may want to turn this into one single layer in order to streamline your layers. A quick way to do this is to use the keyboard shortcut. So with all the layers you wish to place into a pre-comp selected, simply press Command-Shift-C on Mac or Control-Shift-C on PC, and this will bring up the pre-comp settings box. Here I can name this to New Video Comp and make sure to move everything into the new comp and set the duration to span the layer contents and click OK. And now we have placed all the layers into one simple layer. Now remember, upon pre-composing, we will create a new comp which will be present in the project panel. So the next tip set is keyframe tips. So back in the project panel, next double click on the sixth comp, Fish Swim. Here I have an animation sequence of a bunch of fish swimming from the left hand side of the screen to the right. So the first tip is revealing keyframes. By selecting a layer and pressing U on the keyboard, this will reveal any keyframes applied to any effect. This can also be done to quickly reveal keyframes on multiple layers. Simply select all your layers and by pressing U, this will reveal all the keyframes on all the layers. Next tip, expand a keyframe sequence. So if I select a particular layer here, we can see that this animation sequence contains a number of keyframes and spans a certain amount of time. Now, if we want the animation to happen faster or slower over time, we can easily expand or contract the keyframe sequence. To do this, simply select all the keyframes involved, and with them all highlighted in blue, by holding Alt on the keyboard, you can click and drag the first or last keyframe in or out. This will expand or contract the keyframe sequence, which will in turn speed up the sequence or slow it down. Next tip, move along keyframes one at a time. So with the keyframes visible on a layer, if we press K on the keyboard, we can move forward one keyframe at a time. If we press J on the keyboard, we can move back one keyframe at a time. This is really useful when analyzing an animation sequence. However, keep in mind that when using this feature, if you have multiple layers with their keyframes displayed, it will travel across each keyframe on each layer. Next tip, move position on an animation. Now this is a tricky one. If you create an animation with certain position keyframes and try and move the animation to another place, you will notice instead of moving the animation, it simply adds another position keyframe. So I'll press Command Z on Mac or Control Z on PC to undo that. Now to move an animation that consists of lots of position keyframes to another position in the scene, first select all the keyframes for the layer and then make sure to place the time indicator over one of the keyframes. Now it doesn't matter which, but just make sure it's on top of one of the keyframes. With the keyframe indicator on top of one of the keyframes, simply click and drag the object and you will notice the position animation path will move with it. So the last tip is remove easing. When creating animations in After Effects, you will no doubt use easing on your keyframes to add smoothness to your animations. Now there may be times where you want to set your keyframes back to default or change the easing applied. By holding Command on Mac or Control on PC, you can click on keyframes with easing. As you click it, it will remove the easing and set it back to the default keyframe, the diamond shape, ready to apply a different kind of easing. So the final tip set is exporting tips. And the first exporting tip is export a still image. So at any point in your project, if you wish to save out a still image of your sequence to share, simply come up to Composition, scroll down to Save Frame As and click on File. Upon click, you will notice the timeline panel change to the render queue. Down on the bottom left, you can click on the output module and select which frame you like. Here you can set this to JPEG and click where to save the file to, and then hit render on the top right and you will save out a still. And the last and final tip is add a composition to the Adobe Media Encoder. So once you've completed your composition and you are ready to render your video, you can either come up to Composition and select Add to Media Encoder, or you can use the keyboard shortcut. By pressing Command-Alt-M on Mac or Control-Alt-M on PC, you will launch Adobe Media Encoder, where you can define your settings and export your video. So that's a few handy tips in Adobe After Effects it will help to keep in mind as a beginner. Now one last and final tip here. Keyboard shortcut map. Now I have just listed a lot of keyboard shortcuts over this video, but there are so much more. As you begin to use After Effects more and more, if you would like to learn more about the keyboard shortcuts, you can come up to Edit, then scroll down to Keyboard Shortcuts, and upon click, you will launch the Keyboard Shortcut Map. This is a visual display of all the shortcuts in After Effects. Now if you come to the top and toggle down on the command list, you will see a list of all the key categories. By clicking on these and spending some time, you will be able to see and learn many more shortcuts. So over the past 28 videos, I have covered everything you need to know as a beginner in After Effects. Now it's time to take all that we have learned and create a project from scratch. After this last section, you should be able to undertake projects alone and create more work comfortably in After Effects. So before we start on the journey into building a video presentation, I just want to go over exactly what we will be creating over the next 18 episodes, so you have a good idea of what is in store ahead. So see you in the next video.